Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever you're watching this. We're excited to be here today as part of the AAHGS 2020 virtual conference, coming to you from various parts of the country. Excited to bring to you a panel discussion called Gathering at the Welcome Table, a panel bringing together the descendants of slave owners and the descendants of the formerly enslaved. I'll be the moderator today, Tom Reed. And I have two distinguished panelists, good friends that have done this before, that I want to introduce to you today. And then we'll kind of talk about the session description and kind of jump right to it. So first, I'd like to introduce Sharon Batiste Gillins. She is a retired college educator with 27 years of research experience and 15 years of regional and national lecture experience. She's researching, her research and teaching emphasize on the use of underutilized record sources to discover details of 19th century Southern life and ancestry, including that of planter slave owners, enslaved people, and free people of color. Her favorite teaching topics include records of the Freedmen's Bureau, whoop, whoop, I like that too, the Southern Claims Commission records, land, property, wills, and probate records. So very veteran genealogist. Great to have her with us. Sharon, thank you.
Thank you, Tom, for inviting me. This is always one of my favorite subjects. So
and where are you joining us from today?
I'm joining you from the tumultuous weather of Galveston, Texas. We are just in the middle of a threatening storm, a tropical storm. So, but all is well so far, so good.
Okay. We'll keep our fingers crossed.
Thank you.
Going. So the other panelist is good friend Cheri Hudson Passey. She's a professional genealogist, instructor, writer, speaker, and the owner of Carolina Girl Genealogy, LLC. She's the host of genealogy chat show called Gen Friends and is a genealogical researcher. She's been subcontracted by Eagle Investigative Services, Inc. for the U.S. Army Past Conflict Repatriations Branch. Say that 3 times.
3 times. Fast.
No, what does that mean? Explain, Cheri. What
that means I help bring our missing MIA soldiers home by locating living family members who will hopefully provide some DNA to identify bodies. So it's a very rewarding thing. Yeah, that's what that means. That long thing, that's what it means.
Well, great. That's a great service. So thank you for doing that for our soldiers and
it's my honor.
And bringing closure to those families. So, well, so the session description, we're talking about gathering at the welcome table. And really the welcome table is this whole idea of everyone has a seat. It comes from kind of an old Negro spiritual. I'm gonna sit at the welcome table and we talk about gathering. In fact, I have another friend of ours in the genealogy community, Sharon Morgan, and her and a co-author, Tom DeWolf, wrote a book about their specific dealings with each other, finding out they're descendants of slaveholder and descendants of the formerly enslaved in the same family. And her book is called Gather at the Table. I'm not going to sing the hymn for you today because I ain't got that kind of a voice. I'm a choir singer. I'm not a soloist. But really what this panel is going to focus on is kind of this dialogue on how descendants of slave owners and how descendants of the enslaved can work together to discover and share records and bring about healing, understanding, and reconnect families torn apart by the institution of slavery. That's and so as we begin this session, Sharon, we talked about it before, but what's some of the objectives, or what are you thinking, what are you hoping to kind of accomplish, or those that would watch this session will accomplish by participating today?
Well, one of the things that I'm sure of as a researcher is that we are encountering people who are experiencing this. They're either researching their own families or a family of a client, and then they find either the ancestors of the enslaved slaveholder, or they're finding descendants of the enslaved who were in their family. And most people don't know what to do with it. It kind of stops them in their tracks. And we've seen it time and time again. And I think that it's a subject that's past due. We needed to
Mhm.
take the initiative as genealogists to talk about this, to open up the conversation so we can help to inform people on how they can enter into this space that hasn't been truly negotiated before. So normalize and educate. That's
Mhm.
the objective that I see.
Absolutely, education. Cheri, for you, what do you hope we achieve through this session as well?
I'm hoping to alleviate fear and some of the other
Mm.
anxiety, some of those emotions that bubble up when you discover these records that tell you things that perhaps you don't want to know. And how do we go about working together to share and to force some healing as we try to connect families?
Yeah, I hope that those who participate will kind of understand and start to cooperate, and that will lead to kind of that healing and things like that. And hope that maybe we can provide resources to those, you know, who are new to this and how do you approach these things and things like that. But we talked about it before. What are we not going to cover in this? Because we kind of have to, you know, we could go all over the place with this topic. But is there anything, Sharon, that you would say we kind of won't maybe talk about as part of this session that maybe a part of another session will be done somewhere else?
Well, I think one thing that comes up sometimes when we talk about being able to discover the enslavers' families is reparations, and that's a very complex issue and one that may not be appropriate for this discussion because it is complex and it's a completely different thing. Also, I think that the subject of reparations may be in people's minds as an obstacle to this healing, to this process of exchange of information.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for let's kind of dive in then. One of the things, Cheri, you mentioned earlier was about how we can remove fear around this topic. What suggestions would you give in as we approach these, you know,
Right.
relationships and things like that to help remove fear?
First thing is I think we need to understand that we're not responsible for what our ancestors did, especially coming in my role as the descendant of a slave owner. You know, I find these records and there was a lot of fear in getting these records out. Do I tell anybody? Do I hide it? What do I do? So I think the first thing we need to remember is as I'm finding these records, I'm not responsible for what they did. I can try to help, you know, and get these things out, but I'm not responsible. And I think another thing is either side, we need to get over that fear of contacting each other. So whether you are trying to make contact with someone who you know that their ancestors owned your people at some time, you know, it's got to be hard to reach out and see what's going to happen. And the other way around too, my fear level was really high and it took a couple of times to reach out and ask other people, what are you doing? Are you telling anybody? How do you handle this without people thinking you're a terrible person because your ancestor did this? And so it was a discussion with friends, African-American friends that had found these documents before that helped me. And so I think this education piece that Sharon was talking about is so important because I think the education that hopefully that we'll provide today will help people get over their fear.
Okay, thank you. Sharon, any thoughts on that topic about kind of removing fear or how we approach this to take the fear out of it?
Well, I think one thing we should remember is that we as researchers have a different threshold for this type of information. We are out seeking this type of information. But the people that we approach or who we encounter who may have this situation in their family, we find records that relate to them, they may not be researchers at all. They may not have gone out seeking this information, and it may be a lot more shocking to them than to us as researchers and historians who we kind of accept history is, and we try to gain the benefit of what's in the records rather than to carry the burden of the record. We know it's there, But for us, the satisfaction is in finding the information. So we have to be sensitive to the entire community in the way that we address the subject with them, and understanding that there is baggage, there is historical baggage here, and that many people will be concerned about how is this going to affect the rest of the members in my family? How is this going to affect the business? What is the community going to say about this? And so those are the kinds of fear factors, anxiety moments that rise up in people as this subject is being addressed with them.
Yeah. So you know, sensitivity, I think, is a word that keeps coming to mind as you approach this, right? And being having sympathy, and being sympathetic, and empathy, actually, as well. Empathy is more thinking about, you know, what's this experience going to be for someone else,
right?
And then approaching it sensitively as you do that, right? So Sharon, tell us a little bit, how has this topic affected you? What's been your personal experience with either coming across documents or discovering through DNA that you're connected to descendants of a slaveholder, or your family, you know, finding out who your enslaved ancestors were held by?
Well, I have several situations that are related to this topic. The first situation was when I was a baby genealogist, and I discovered a DNA connection with an ancestor, and I made a contact with a descendant of that ancestor. And before we got into the DNA part, we were discussing documents and everything. And then when I dropped the DNA bomb, I got ghosted. I was cut off completely. So, I mean, I did not approach it with sensitivity. I made the mistake of being just a little bit too blunt about it, and matter of fact. It was matter of fact to me, but it wasn't matter of fact to them, and I wasn't sensitive to that. So that was one experience. On the other end, I have been working for a private foundation, and I found some beautiful documents and historic tintypes of an enslaved person and their family. And I had to speak with a board of trustees about it to see how they wanted to proceed. And so it was in that action that I figured out, or at least work my way through a process that would enable me to communicate this information to a board, and then to be able to make the next step, which in this case was to donate the record. And then I've only recently been in touch with a collateral descendant of the enslaver, and she's been completely open. But I established a relationship with her before I told her that I was a descendant of the enslaved people in that family. And so I've gone about it differently, and some of my experiences that were not the best way to go about it, I'm trying to capture those, remember those, and hopefully share with others, because I know other people are having this experience.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing the lessons learned, right, along the way, and you obviously had good experiences and bad experiences either way. So Cheri, how has this impacted you? Tell us about kind of the connections maybe that you've been able to uncover, where you see the relationship between the descendants of an enslaved person and your family.
Right. Documents is what, you know, led me to understand and know, even though, I mean, you know, all my ancestors are from the South. You would have thought I had a clue as I was a baby genealogist. And then I can remember distinctly finding those first documents, the census records, you know, with the slave records, and the wills, probate packages, you know, people being sold, and it just hurt. I went and visited a historical plantation that an ancestor owned, and oh, it was so fun walking around the plantation. And then they took us back to the cemetery, the slave cemetery. And I think that the documents hurt, but walking back there and the realization this was real, you know, these were just not names on a document that I'd found. It was real. And so I was able to take some information from that plantation that I found, and turn in some a whole list of names of the formerly enslaved on that plantation, and get that out to the public. In doing so, I started putting things out, letting people know, that I had these records and I wanted to connect. And I've had several people connect, get a hold of me on various websites saying we need to connect because I'm the descendant of one of the enslaved that your ancestor owned. And so that at first was a little, I didn't know what they wanted at first. I was a little nervous, but
That's it.
I went ahead and I started to share, and we've worked through a lot of that. And I've been able to share documents that have helped them move back generations, and they've been able to give me documents that they had that have helped me as well. And so I think we need to come to that realization when we find these records and say to ourselves, okay, what are we going to do with these? We need to get them out of hiding. We can get these names out of hiding and work together with people. And I think that's the most important thing that we need to do in this situation.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that leads us kind of in the next thing is like, once you find out, what do you do? Like, if the names are on documents, what suggestions do you have, Sharon, if someone comes across a document of how to maybe share that information or start the process of making that connection? Any tips or thoughts?
Well, realizing that it might not be the same process for everybody. One person may feel comfortable contacting the descendants or making it very known to descendants, and another person just may feel, I need to do something with these records, and we have to make that space safe for both of them. There's no criticism if they don't want to have a personal relationship, but still desire to get the information out. So there are some very good resources that I can suggest. Just on a local level, share the information with the Historical Society or with your local library. If you want to go and make the reach broader for the records, there is a website called Beyond Kin, and they are developing databases and information in a safe space for descendants of the enslaved and descendants of the enslaver to share documents and to share experiences with the documents. So those are definitely suggestions that I can give for people who may come across the documents and want to do something with them at different levels.
Good. So Cheri, you had talked about your experience when you had your experience and you discovered some things. You put it out there broadly. How did you go about putting it out there as well and helping people get access to the documents or this information?
When I find a document that has some names in it, I will create a blog post. And I will put the picture of the document, anything that I know about the slaveholder, whether this is my own family or something I found in research. If it's somebody else's research, I have to get permission, but I really haven't had anybody tell me I couldn't do it. So I will create a blog post, because when you do that, of course, it makes all these names and the location and the document and any name that you put in there makes it searchable, and so it helps people find what you found. It facilitates those connections. And then I'll also, then I'll take that blog post and upload it to anything I can think of that might get to the correct audience. Either way, to the county that this document came from. There are several African-American Facebook pages that welcome that type of information too. So even if you don't blog, even if you don't have a blog, you can take that information and put it on Facebook. And it's easy to find. Just do a Facebook search for African-American genealogy and see what pops up, and start putting them there. And it's become known as releasing their names, because these names in these documents have not been said out loud for so many years. So you're putting those names out there, hoping that their descendants will connect with them.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned about Facebook. I was going to say that because that has been, I've seen a lot of that on various Facebook groups that I'm a part of, that people will say, hey, I found this document. It lists the slaveholder. Anybody have information on the descendants of the slaveholder? So like, I might see if they have any family documents out there. And it's just amazing the connections that get made through things like that. But just putting it out there, saying their names, I think starts to attract the descendants to make those.
Oh, I agree, because they want to be found. They want to be connected. So,
Right.
you know, we all have to do our part, you know,
Yeah.
in any way we can to connect families.
So we've talked a little bit about documents, but DNA is kind of a different thing. And Sharon, you mentioned kind of the DNA kind of changed things for you. What is discovering an slaveholder connection different when it's through DNA, would you say?
Well, I think it certainly raises the anxiety level. It raises the stakes in a way, because not only was there an enslaved relationship, there was some type of physical interaction, which was probably not a consensual relationship. And therein layers on another whole layer of guilt and upset and embarrassment and shame. And again, as Cheri said, you cannot be responsible for what your ancestors did. But as a descendant, I don't point fingers at them to blame them, but my goal is the same as their goal would be, which is to identify family members, and they are family members, despite the unpleasant circumstances of how they may have become my family members. And so one of the things that I want to do is reestablish a relationship with the DNA descendants of the enslaver in a different way that will allow them to have less anxiety about it and less fear about it. And let's face it, we live in a society, a litigious society, and we also live in a society where the finances sometimes rule or influence decisions. And so I think one of the things that I'll do is to be very, very upfront about what I do want and what I don't want. I do want family. I don't want your family's money or inheritance. I'm not coming to you for that. I'm only coming to you for family. I'm not here to place blame or to criticize. I'm here to reunite my family, and you just happen to be part of that. So being able to be upfront with them, and also being patient with them, being able to accept that. So I'm learning that I need to develop a relationship before I go into some of the details of the familial relationship between enslavers and enslaved. And so I share as much with them as I can.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You know, and so, and the reality of that is, as an African American, I have to research their family. I have to research the enslaver's family. And so oftentimes I will have more information, more detailed and personal information about the enslaver's family than they might have. So I start out by sharing what I have, sharing what I have, and then build up to the point of saying, and we share DNA. But once we have a relationship, I think it's easier to add that layer of complexity to it.
I thank you for sharing that. Is there like any specific example that you can share that wouldn't violate anyone's privacy of where this has kind of worked for you? Is there a relationship that you've developed over multiple years that, you know, you're giving us the tip, but how has it impacted you personally? You know, if you can, I want to respect.
No, it's okay. I can share it in a non-specific way. I'm researching in North Carolina. I was able to research my my maternal ancestry from Texas to Northampton, North Carolina. I began to share information with a person in a Roots Web group about what I had found. And we just developed a relationship. I didn't tell her any non-truths. I just didn't tell her everything at once.
Okay.
And once I felt like we had developed a relationship where she felt comfortable sharing with me, and she did. She sent maps, she sent information, she sent stories. I sent things to her. I sent probate, land, things that I knew would be about their family. And then I shared with her that, and oh, by the way, I am a descendant of the enslaved, and we share some DNA. And she was fine with it. You know, I was as anxious about that moment.
You're like, how's she gonna take this, right?
How's she gonna take this? Am I gonna get ghosted again?
Good track record, so, and then you kind of have to drop the bomb on. And you said she accepted it. How
she did? She did, but
long?
She also was a researcher. She was also a researcher. I would say over about 8 or 9 months.
Okay.
We just developed a relationship and started sending things back and forth. I would ask questions, she would ask questions, and she was a collateral of the enslavers, so she may not have had the same level of anxiety, but she didn't have any problem with it. And I told her about our work in trying to make this a safe space. And she thought that was just great. And she said, anything I can do, just let me know. So I think that our process of developing a relationship with the other side is important if you are going to share difficult information, so that we normalize this. None of us had anything to do with the way this thing worked out. We're just on the other end. The other thing that I did for her is to let her know that I felt that way. I don't feel like you're to blame, but what you're doing is so valuable by sharing it. And I gave them praise for being open to sharing and accepting the information that I provided.
Wow. Well, thank you. That's a great story. So Cheri, we'll turn to you.
Okay.
What's been your experience with DNA connections? Right.
Well, before I do that, I just want to piggyback a minute on what Sharon said. And we need to realize that nobody owes us anything. They don't owe us an answer. We cannot contact somebody through Ancestry or whatever and say, we've got matching DNA. You will give me what you have. We need to share. People need to process first. A lot of people got on with their DNA because they just wanted to see, you know, I'm from Scotland or whatever. And then all of a sudden, African-American appears.
Yes.
And it's going to take them a while to process. So we can't be demanding. We can't treat them like, you know, you have to send me this information. So we've got to be patient and be kind. My DNA story is testing my mom. And she has 2% African-American DNA. No family stories. You know, we've got the Cherokee. I am from South Carolina, so we've got the Cherokee, right? So no Cherokee, but the African-American. And so that, I mean, we really just looked at that, and I said, okay, I'm going to try to figure out which generation. So it's nothing that any of us want to hide or anything like that. As a matter of fact, with the new estimates that came out, what's really funny is my brother, who wasn't showing any African-American, because we all know that DNA does that, right? It just goes to different people. It just,
different
you know,
ways.
the combination, and it goes down the line different ways. Now I've got 1% and he's got 1%. So that's just really interesting. So it's still in there, even with the, you know, the new updates, which we knew it would be. And I was glad, because I've been working on this project. I didn't want it to disappear. So I've been working on a project trying to see which generation. I cannot find anything in a paper trail, which doesn't surprise me, because, you know, sometimes that just wasn't put on documents. But so I'm not sure where, and I know it's on my maternal side, but it was I think it was more of a shock to my mom because she's not a researcher, but she's been around me enough to know you never know what you're going to find. And so now I've got both, I've got the DNA that I'm trying to figure out, and I haven't had anybody connect with me yet with the DNA saying, we are connected through DNA. I've had people connect because we connect through documents, but not DNA. And so the documents is on my paternal side, and I'm waiting for somebody to help me out with that DNA so that I'm hoping somebody will reach out to me. And so that will help me find that connection so I can honor that ancestor.
Yeah. So tell me, I didn't realize that it's more on the document side that you've had someone that's connected with you. Tell me about
Right.
that experience and how and what was your ability to respond. We kind of heard from Sharon's side of things.
Yes.
But I'd love for you to
Yes.
be the one who's being contacted because
Right.
someone found their ancestor in a document of your ancestor being the slaveholder.
Right. Right. Well, fortunately for me, because I think if it had happened earlier, I might have been a little bit more timid and afraid, but the connection came for me after I had made the discovery. So it wasn't a new, oh my gosh, I did not know that I had. So, I mean, I'm not sure how I would have acted. I think my years as a researcher and the experience that I've had, and because like Sharon said, that's what we are looking for. We're looking at the documents. So we're looking for the documents, looking for those family connections. Actually, honestly, I was a little happy that somebody reached out to me because I knew, and I had put some things online, and I've had people reach out to me through just my tree on Ancestry and Family Search. And I've also had people reach out to me due to my blog. The most recent was from my blog because they hit that name connection and that place connection, and actually contacted me through a chat message in an institute class I was taking this summer and just said, hey, we are connected through this person. And I went, oh my gosh. And so we've since then, other people have contacted me on this particular line before, and it's great because I've been able to connect them to each other, but shared all the documents that I'd found since that I had put that blog post out with him. And I think I mentioned earlier that he was able to go back almost two generations from the information that I had collected since I'd done that blog post. So that was really amazing. So I'm at a spot where I welcome it. I don't know, to be honest, I don't know how it would have felt, 10, 15 years ago. I don't know. I hope that I would have said, okay, we're going to work on this together. That's what I hope I would have done. But like I said, because I've been researching, I knew that I had ancestors that were enslavers. So.
Well, you bring up a good point, and I want to make sure we get both sides of this, right? You were expecting, you were kind of hoping, you were maybe sitting on the information, got contacted. It was somewhat of a positive experience. It's not always a negative experience. And I think it's important for us to know that it can go either way. And someone who may be on the other side, who may be on your side, doesn't know what to do. And so when someone contacts them, they're welcoming, okay, I can finally get this to the right people, right? So that is one reaction that's there. And that's obviously been your experience. But we also know that there's others who are like, no, that's not. I get that. Well, I don't know if that's, have either of you run into that? Where Cheri, go ahead.
Sorry, Tom. Didn't mean to talk over you. I'm sorry. Zoom's hard to not talk over people. But what I was going to say is that's why these panels like this are so important. And that's why Sharon and I, when we met serendipitously in the Family History Library, I was preparing for a talk about what to do with your records when you find the records of the enslaved. And Sharon was sitting next to me. I don't know what Sharon was doing. She was researching, but she was listening to my conversation as I was speaking to people about what I was doing. And then she leans over and we started talking and we went, we need to do this topic together. It was meant to be. And so Yeah, I think that doing more of these kind of educational things and explaining and helping people to understand, expect it,
Mm-hmm.
embrace it, work together, it brings healing. So I think that's the great message in doing these kind of panels.
Yeah,
And I think we as genealogists have to take the lead.
Mm-hmm.
It's our responsibility here
Sure.
to take the lead because we are discovering the documents, interpreting the documents, sharing the documents, and now there's the DNA that becomes part. We're reconstructing families, and it's up to us to help people navigate this space. We don't know, and our genealogists don't know how to navigate this space.
Very true.
I
Very
was
true.
so encouraged by, first of all, the number of people who attended the session
Mm-hmm.
and the responses that we got and the enthusiasm from
Yes.
people and the sharing and the breathing. You could see people go, oh, thank the Lord, I can finally put this on my back,
Uh-huh.
Exactly.
There was a lot of that.
Right. It was a lot of it, and to the point where they said, oh, we've got to do this again.
Yeah.
Let's keep moving forward with this. So,
And
right.
that's why we're here, actually.
Yeah.
And I
Yes,
saw
you
what
are.
happened, and then got approached by AAHGS to make sure that we had the discussion in this space now with this conference, right? And so we talked a little bit before, but and you've kind of hit on it. But what can institutions do, or what should we talked about people and what individual research
Right.
do, but I'd love your thoughts on, Sharon, maybe what institutions can do to kind of advance this conversation and continue and help people make these connections and have this healing and come to this understanding.
Well, one of the things that's obvious to all of us as researchers when we use a family database program is we can't include that as there's no mechanism in the database programs to include the enslavers. And so we're like going all around trying to figure out and invent ways to include this very critical information in our family trees. And I think that the tree makers and the roots magics and they have to work on a way to include the complete story of African-American families, and not just African-American families, all families, because and so this is not new to them in terms of having to change and expand, because at some point there was probably not mechanisms for step families and extended families. But now the genealogical community is going to ask for ways to include this type of information in a very accepted way of storing and chronicling the composition of a family. So that I think is really important. It will normalize it.
Yeah,
exactly.
We are, and just a shameless plug for Family Search, we are
shameless.
Good, go for it.
But we are looking at how
that's fantastic.
Non-familial relationships in family tree, right? Because everything in family tree assumes like a husband and wife, child parent relationship. And that's not always the case in this type of relationship, and lots of other relationships where it'd be good to connect people who are non-kin or non-familial in certain cases. And so we're looking at how to do that, and hopefully we'll be announcing at conferences in the future that feature update to Family Search. But I like the fact that you pointed out, it needs to be in all platforms, right? And Beyond Kin, which you mentioned earlier, has been attempting to do that. I think they've found kind of a system or a way to document enslaved people and slaveholders within Ancestry, for example. And I know they've approached us at Family Search about doing kind of same thing. And so I hope that your suggestion will be taken to heart by other, tree record managers and tree makers and things like that, in terms of including these types of relationships. So thank you for that suggestion.
Sharon, and I'll add that it's not just non-familial relationships, because we've got the DNA.
Right.
Exactly.
So we have DNA relationships that are not necessarily the relationships that come from the traditional husband-wife relationship. Right. So there's some work that we'll have to do, but we're moving in the right direction, and thank God for the the consciousness is being raised by programs that are in media these days, like Finding Your Roots and things like that.
Yeah. Cheri, any thoughts on what institutions can do or other organizations can do to kind of help support this effort?
Right. Well, I mean, we appreciate the fact that, we've been able to do this at a couple of conferences. And so
Yes.
I would suggest that, this becomes a yearly thing at conferences. Let's get together. Let's continue moving things forward. Let's keep this conversation going. Institutes, webinars, all sorts of places have classes. We need to teach people how to work together with this, how to overcome their fears, where to put the record. So all these things that we've been talking about would be wonderful additions to curriculums, to institutes, and webinars and conferences, and any place that wants some genealogy education needs to be added to it, so that it's not just this, okay, we heard this once, and who do I talk to, and what do I do now, and that kind of thing. Places where people can turn and learn, and then, like we said, keep that conversation moving forward, progressing. And we can make all these goals that we've been talking about, we can make them come to reality, because it's not just a one-time thing and then nobody mentions it again, which happens a lot when we're trying to get things done, right? You hear it once and then you never hear about it again. Well, Sharon and I are not going to let that happen, right, Sharon?
and I'm here with you to help.
Exactly, you are, and we appreciate that.
And so as we kind of wrap things up here, I want to give you kind of a chance to maybe either summarize or share something. I know you took a little different approach at Rootstep, for example, with kind of how you share things. Is there anything that you haven't said today that's been on your mind as we've been kind of preparing for this session, or that's even popped into your mind since we've been talking today that you would share? And I'll direct to Sharon. Is there anything additional or that you would punctuate what we talked about today?
Well, Cheri and I have shared our experiences, but ours are not unique in the community. Every genealogist, every researcher has the potential to come across this, and we don't know all the answers. We're working it out as we go. We just know that there needs to be a discussion, and that genealogists are in a great place to start the discussion. So we want to hear from you. We want to hear from those people who are out there, who have come across this, who've had the great outcomes and the not so great outcomes, so we can share those as well.
Good. Cheri.
And what can we do to help you? What kind of things do we need to be talking about to help you overcome your fear? Know where to put information, what to do with the information when you find it. We need to hear from you, because we can't move forward without that conversation. We've told you our stories and what we've tried to do, but we need to hear from you. Ask us those questions, help us to move forward and set some more goals for the community.
Yeah, the one thing that's kind of just popping into my head is we've talked kind of theoretical, we've given some kind of suggestions, but is there a workshop where we can actually take people through some process, develop that? Maybe that's where we need to go with this. As you said, continue the discussion, but do it in a practical way where people can say, okay, yeah, this is how I would use a tool like Beyond Kind, or this is how I would post it on my blog, or this is how I would post it on Facebook, or this is the script I would use, or this is how I would build a relationship with someone before dropping a DNA bomb on them. And maybe have some really how-tos or something like that. I think is that's one that came to mind for me.
I love that idea.
So
I love it.
How this develops, and we definitely
sign us up, huh, Sharon?
Absolutely. So we welcome feedback, and Cheri, I appreciate you asking. And as we end this session, we definitely want to hear from those who have watched this session either live, and we'll do some Q&A after, or after this session. What can we do to support the community, and what can the community do? We talked about institutions and individuals, but hopefully we can come together as a community and really foster this healing and understanding and make these connections. These connections as difficult as they may be to reconcile, are the things that help us break through brick walls and really connect. That's what all of our goal is to know our ancestors, to be able to connect with them, to say their names. And by working collaboratively together and overcoming the fears and really trying to build relationships and be helpful to each other, I think we'll do a lot for all of us to advance our genealogical research and our family connections. So we thank all of you who have participated today. I want to thank you, Sharon. I want to thank you, Cheri. I appreciate you so much. This has been such a great experience working towards this and also putting this together today. We've had a great conversation, so I thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been my pleasure.
All right. Well, we'll sign off and talk to you all soon. We'll see.